Welcome to our Spring Agent Forum. I am Bev Pierce. I am the Corporate Training Manager at RI Realtors. I will be your moderator this morning. We have a great group of panelists that have joined us today to share their expertise and their areas pertaining to fair housing and diversity. Before we begin, we're going to show you a few minutes of a video to kind of lead us into the topic today. So we're going to show you just about 5 minutes of it, and then we'll discuss it following.
Yeah. So, 1, 2, 3. My name is Jesus Rivera. Today's the 21st of April.
It's about 10 after 2, and I'm in my car.
So it's Richard Helling, testing as Matt Browning on May 3rd.
Hello. Hi. My name is Kelvin Toon. How you doing? Yes, Kelvin.
How are you?
Yeah, me and my wife is looking to purchase a home within the Brentwood area.
They were ordinary Long Islanders.
Great.
Maybe go get some more then, okay?
And we sent them to meet with real estate agents to ask about buying their first home.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
All good? Thank you.
They were trained, confident, and followed scripts.
Tag in Stephen Macropolis as Nicholas Parisi.
They had no idea what houses agents would suggest, or even which communities.
You were not going to like those schools.
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood.
Mixed neighborhood.
If agents are courteous and professional, how can you know that they're treating you equally compared with someone of a different race or ethnicity?
I have to say it without saying it, you know.
Behind smiles and handshakes, how do you know if they're giving you fewer options or suggesting different areas?
I'm not going to send you anything you want to do unless you don't want to store your car to buy your crap.
Or that rules don't apply to you and another home buyer in the same way.
Yeah, okay. I definitely need that.
Long Island is one of America's most segregated suburbs. Newsday set out to discover what role real estate agents might play in keeping it that way, potentially affecting the quality of lives.
Technically, as a real estate agent, we shouldn't tell the buyers.
In house hunting, it's nearly impossible to see evidence of hidden discrimination. You would never know unless you go undercover.
In one test, Johnny Mae Alston was the black tester and Cindy Parry was the white tester, and they met with Anne-Marie Quealy-Bichon at Signature Premier Properties office in Cold Spring Harbor. They asked for the same thing. As often happens, the agent discussed getting pre-qualified or pre-approved for a mortgage by a bank, showing how much a buyer can spend on a house.
You pre-qualified, I asked. My husband's working with somebody in a bank.
We've done some preliminary talks, you know, about getting pre-approved.
Neither had been pre-approved or pre-qualified. Here's what the agent told the black tester.
So I really need that. I won't take out any money unless you have a pre-qualification letter. So I need to know that means I can't pre-qualify for a mortgage. Oh, so that means I can't go out to see anything. I won't do it. You can try another person, but I don't have the time.
And without pre-approval, here's what the agent told the white tester.
What is your availability? When can you start looking at houses? I would say not this coming week.
Cindy received 79 listings from this agent. Johnny Mae couldn't get any listings. And Cindy, the white tester, received 2 home tours. They had the same finances, the same budget, and they made the same request in the same area. But one was white, the other was black. The agent treated them differently. Quealy-Bichon did not respond to a letter, calls, and emails. Her agency's Signature Premier Properties co-owner and 2 branch managers viewed the recordings and declined to comment.
A 3-year undercover Newsday investigation revealed evidence of widespread hidden discrimination by real estate agents brokering home sales across Long Island. For Hispanic home seekers, evidence of unfair treatment emerged 39% of the time. For Asians, the rate was 19%. Black house hunters in the investigation risked unequal, lesser access to homes and communities just about half the time when compared to white buyers.
We'll stop that video there, but we are going to share with you in the chat the agenda, which will contain the link to this entire video for you to watch at a later time, and along with a lot of other resources. Kind of eye-opening, isn't it? And kind of a good lead into what we're going to talk about today. We have a great group of folks with us today. And again, these are professionals that have been in the business for a long time and have been willing to share their knowledge and their time with us. We know time is very valuable, so we appreciate you being here with us today. First, we have our Rhode Island Realtors Chief Executive Officer, Phil Tedesco. You can see here, this is what he looks like late at night when Anne's trying to reach him about something urgent in professional development. But Phil is an RCE, a CAE, and has his CIPS, and he's been involved in membership and services marketing for the nonprofit organizations for over 30 years. He has been with the Rhode Island Association for 7 years and is also the executive director of the Realtor Foundation, Rhode Island. Prior to arriving here in Rhode Island, he's worked with associations in Arizona, Florida, and California, as well as a global real estate organization. Phil, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Monica will be joining us in the form of a video today. She had a prior engagement, but she did record some great segment for us today. And you can see she's, for a very long time, been very comfortable talking to folks on the phone, our wonderful general counsel. And she's licensed in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, a formal general counsel for the Massachusetts Association of Realtors, the associate counsel for the Home Builders Association of Massachusetts, with some government work, private practice, and some other adventures in between. And she's always very supportive and contributes to our program. So thanks for that. David Salvatore is our Rhode Island Realtors Government Affairs Director. And he's joining us again this morning to share his insight. Thank you, David. And Brenda Hayden joins us from Rhode Island Housing. She's the Assistant Director of Home Ownership. And she joined RI Housing 4 years ago to serve as the Assistant Director of Home Ownership. She manages the underwriting operations of the residential mortgage loan programs to ensure that all Rhode Islanders have access to housing that meets their needs. In her current role, Brenda also manages RI Housing's home buyer educations programs. She has over 3 decades of experience in housing finance and most recently served as a vice president at the Washington Trust Company. Susan Martins-Phipps joins us today. She has many, many years experience in the business. She's owner of Phipps Appraisals. She is a sales associate at Phipps Realty. She's of course a Realtor member. She's the past chair of the Rhode Island Appraisal Board, on the Appraisal Foundation Board, and currently serves on the NAR's Valuation and Fair Housing Committee. Thank you so much for joining us, Susan. Mark McHugh joins us again. He's the broker owner at Clearmark Real Estate and a member of the Rhode Island Realtors Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and past president of the Kent Washington Association of Realtors, and a member of the NAR Housing Opportunities Committee. Mark's very busy. Thank you for joining us today, Mark. Jeff Nelson joining us today. He's a loan officer at Embrace Home Loans and also a member of the RI Realtors Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And we have Anne joining us today from Florida. Thank you, Anne, for joining us. There's Anne, always with the smile on, right? She's our Director of Professional Development of RI Realtors. She has been with us for years and many years in the real estate business as a former broker manager. So thank you for joining us, Anne. And you guys all know me. Oh, I skipped me. Bev Pierce, I'm the corporate training manager here. I'm a GSI, MCCT, ABR, PSA, SFR, all those letters. And you can see for quite some time, I have been a talker. My mouth is open quite a lot. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you sharing your time and your expertise with us. So To start off again, I'm going to share in the chat just a few minutes from now. I'm going to send you the agenda. You're going to have all of the articles and the links that we are talking about, as well as any handouts that our participants, our panelists are going to share with you today. I am going to turn things over to Phil Tedesco, who's going to talk about fair housing and other D&I initiatives. And Phil, let me know when you'd like me to run that poll for you.
Thank you, Bev. I'll get it at some point here. So yeah, I hope that kind of scared you seeing that video. I would like to think some of you may have been aware of it previously and taken the time to look at it, but if not, it's very eye-opening. I think my main advice is to be consistent with folks. Consistency in how you treat your clients is probably going to be a safety mechanism. So one of the things I wanted to mention, NAR has been spending a lot of time in this area. They introduced Fairhaven. I'm not sure if folks have heard about this yet. In November, NAR introduced a new interactive training platform, and it's designed to help combat discrimination in U.S. real estate. So I mentioned it's called Fairhaven, and it's an immersive simulation. It's available. It's free to members throughout the country. So it's pretty cool, actually. It was produced in partnership with Ernst & Young, and it takes you to a fictional town called Fairhaven, where you work to close 4 deals, and they build in situations that make you confront discrimination kind of in the field. And they've got the clock ticking, so just like real life, to add a little bit of stress to the situation. And you advance through the simulation, receiving specific feedback on your interactions. So it's actually relevant in real life situations. It took about an hour for me to go through, a little bit more. I think they say 60, maybe to 100 minutes, but you could pause it, come back as necessary. I told you, I went through it and I thought it was pretty well done. I will admit, and I told my staff, they laughed at me, I did have one deal completely blow up in my face. I completely mismanaged it and did not handle it well. And honestly, I mean, if I had a commission riding on that, I probably would have learned a lot more, a lot faster. So I think it's worth going through this this exercise. Another interesting angle is that you walk through it from the shoes of a home buyer facing discrimination. So it's interesting to see that angle. It could, like I said, it can be really eye-opening. But I encourage you to go through the process. If you go to fairhaven.realtor, you can get started. And they actually track your progress as a member. I think you maybe enter your NERDS number. And then you have the ability to, print up a certificate of completion. Anybody that goes through it, you have the ability to share it on social media. So it could be a great way of celebrating, Fair Housing Month. Another great resource that recently came out of National, and maybe Susan will speak to this as well, is a 54-minute video that they partnered with the Perception Institute to overcome barriers to fair housing. It's an implicit bias video. It's been around for about the same amount of time. And this takes a deeper dive into implicit bias. And as a reminder, an implicit bias is any unconsciously held set of associations about a social group. So it can result in an attribution of particular qualities to an individual from that group. So basically, it's a form of unconscious stereotyping. If we want to be blunt. Since implicit biases are the product of learned associations and social conditioning, I think the video is able to help you recognize and consciously identify when it actually might be influencing your actions. So I thought it was really powerful. I thought it was really well done and well worth the time to revisit the subject in this professional context. So I'd strongly encourage you to take an hour or so to do that as well. And I think that link is also included in what Bev's providing. And then finally, I'm really proud to announce that we recently launched a Diversity and Inclusion Committee at the state level. I think we launched last August, and we were recognized just last year by NAR for leading and supporting a committee on diversity and inclusion. So it's chaired by Agata Del Borgo, who's our incoming president, and staffed by Kerry Park, who's our marketing and PR person. You may know either of them. And it's great. The purpose of the committee is to develop and recommend strategies and actions to identify, encourage, and recruit future leadership that represents the diversity of the membership. They'll also be recommending policies regarding any actions related to inclusion in what we're doing. And really what I'm very happy about is we're making sure that we're fostering awareness and understanding of issues related to race, ethnicity, disability, and other protected classes. I'm also hoping that the committee is going to take on the charge of educating members on how to serve their diverse clientele in these areas. So we're really new to this space, and we're learning a lot as we go. It's almost like a design build project. But what we're encouraging, we ask the brokers, and I'll ask you folks as well. I think we might have a poll at some point, just what you have in place, maybe at the brokerage. You have policies in place. Is this something you've been discussing? As I mentioned, it's all new to us, so we're kind of learning as we go. But I'm really proud of the fact that we moved into this space and are actually trying to have these conversations openly and directly. So I think that's everything I had to cover. I'm happy to take questions. Ann, is there anything else you wanted me to cover?
No, I think you covered it all. Thank you. So Bev, do we have that poll available?
Yeah, do you want to do the Fairhaven one or the policy one? I personally I completed the Fairhaven program, and it was very eye-opening, and I feel like it was very well done too, and definitely worth the time. And it took me, I think it took me about an hour to do it, and it was well worth it.
Did you have any deals blow up in your face? Be honest.
I know, Phil, actually, I did not. I was successfully completed my 4 deals within the time. Although in my defense, I did have a real estate license. I don't know if that helped me, right? All right. So Phil, thanks so much. We are going to now turn things over to Mark McHugh. And he's going to talk about the D&I committee and some of the things that are going on there. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you, Bev. And thanks to Bev and Ann for putting this together. Thanks to all the participants. But the real thanks goes out to all of you who are joining us today. It means that you actually are interested and want to move the Rhode Island Realtors further along in doing the right thing. Just to follow up with a little bit with what Phil said, education is the key. And I think during this pandemic, it's become a lot easier, or we've become more accustomed to working online, learning online, going to these Zoom meetings. There's less excuses. We know we're all busy people, but it's an easier way to educate yourself. Our diversity inclusion committee here at Rhode Island Realtors is working on ways to help with that education and to bring, as Phil said, to bring some people into our leadership roles that will, have real life experience with diversity and inclusion, and hope that we all can do better as realtors with the way things have evolved over time. If any of you have taken the diversity inclusion certification or have studied fair housing, I think I've taken fair housing, ethics, and lead courses probably a dozen times each. And every time I take one of those courses, I walk away with something that I didn't know before, something that's helped. But the history of the realtors has a bit of a dark past, and you could say it was the sign of the times or whatever it was, but the history of blockbusting or steering buyers and profiling was really something that we've had to overcome for years. And to see the video that we just saw, obviously we still have a long way to go. So it's great that you're all here to kind of foster this idea. Consistency, as Phil mentioned, I think is the key here. The golden rule: treat everyone as you would want to be treated. Treat every client, customer agent, people that you interact with in the process, the same. I do a lot of rentals as well, and I think in the rental market, it becomes there's a magnifying glass on that consistency, because it's a different population than those buying a home. In many cases, they're either, they're just want to live somewhere, they don't want to own a home, or they're still working on the process of trying to work their financial situation. But rentals are a great way to work in real estate, and it's even more important that you are consistent with every client. Using scripts is something that our company does, and I think are very helpful. Whether you're on the phone or it's email, everyone fills out the same application, everyone is vetted the same way, and I think it's the best way to make sure that we're doing the best for the public. With education, I think another important thing for realtors is to advocate for fair housing. I'm sure everyone has been, and this should be a poll question, have you ever been in a situation where your client or another agent has said something or acted disparagingly? And I think as a realtor, it's your job, tactfully, of course, but it's your job to point it out and get everyone steered in the right direction. And that's something that our diversity and inclusion committee has been working on as well, making sure that we as realtors will advocate, kind of call the BS on people who are still living in the dark ages, I guess. Last, I just want to tell a little story of something that happened to me personally. Early in my career, I was helping a woman sell her home in Providence. She had been there for 50 years and was really nervous about the whole situation. So we marketed the property, we got a contract, and I said, we have a great buyer. She's a nurse. She's got a great job, well qualified. And of course, as you know, in the inspections, things came up. There were termite damage. We did over $7,000 worth of work, but she was committed. She knew it was a good buyer, that they had the money to buy the house. So we come to the closing table, and we're all sitting down, back when you could actually all get together and sit at the love fest of a closing. And she leans over to me and she said, "You didn't tell me she was Black." And I leaned over, I said, "No, I told you she was a nurse and well qualified to buy your home." And she leans over and she says, "What will my neighbors think?" And I looked at her and I said, "She's been there 50 years. I said, "Have you looked at your neighborhood? A lot has changed in 50 years. And that was really hitting home. And after I closed the property and thought about what had happened, had I used the information that I knew, or had they seen each other, maybe during the inspections, things wouldn't have gone so well. She had this implicit bias. So again, it's important to treat everyone the same, and also advocate with your fellow realtors and people you work with. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so I've neglected to tell you all, I did tell you in the chat that we are in webinar today, and we do invite you to ask questions. We do want it to be an interactive session. So you do have the Q&A down at the toolbar on the bottom of your screen. So please type your questions in there and we will read and answer them. If you see a question that's been asked and you'd also like to see it answered, there is an upvote option. You can click the little thumbs up and that will move the question higher up on the list. So we'll see it earlier there. So please do that, and we'll make sure to answer those questions when we can. We'll take a little time in between topics. So I'd like to turn it over to Brenda. Brenda is going to take over and she's going to talk about Rhode Island housing affordability and other minority programs. Brenda, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today and just to be part of your discussion regarding fair housing. We think it's very important that the conversations are happening. And this is what we're going to need in order to drive transformation in this arena. Discriminatory practices, they've been around for a long time, and we want to do as much as we can to eliminate them. As the challenges with housing move forward, if someone's being discriminated against with access to housing, it's creating an instability, and it's within the community. It happens for that individual. It happens regarding access to education. And also what we've kind of been concentrating a lot on at Rhode Island Housing is just that access to credit. So as we continue to move forward, one of the things that Rhode Island Housing has kind of taken a lead role in is that education piece. I don't know if any of you have seen, I saw an article this morning that was published by a Hub Wallet, and it's ranking Rhode Island as being number 43 for having the least amount as a complete whole for Rhode Islanders for financial literacy. And why this is important is because you're on the front line. So a lot of individuals, when they're interacting with you, they may not know what that access to credit is. They may not be aware of the products that are available. So it is important that we do try to educate as many individuals as possible. Rhode Island Housing has moved to a virtual platform in order to educate first-time home buyers. And I do have to tell you, we've been really successful. Over the past 7 months, we've educated well over 1,000 individuals. So we are taking the steps to provide that level of education. And I think Mark's comment with, treating individuals as you would want to be treated is essential. What we look at is we want to create that human experience to be the best experience for everybody. It shouldn't just be a certain segment of the population that gets treated a certain way. It should be every individual is treated the same. So, that's one of the things that I think as a lender, we always strive for that consistency. And, at Rhode Island Housing, I will tell you that according to our volume of 2020, 51% of the loans that we did were actually given to minorities. And what really puts us in a unique situation as a housing agency is the level of down payment assistance that we're providing. And about 96% of all of the loans that we do have that component attached to it. So, it is a barrier that I think many individuals face. The crunch that right now that we're seeing with affordable housing is many resources as we can identify is essentially what's going to help out that lower income borrower. So, currently we did have a down payment assistance of $10,000 that was introduced in September. And we've also increased the extra assistance loan up to $15,000. So we are trying to kind of bridge that gap as much as possible. But many first-time home buyers being in that low affordability are being priced out of the market. So I will tell you that conversations are happening, not only here at this level, but also in the finance industry as well. I'm participating next week in a call with Fannie Mae. And what we're kind of challenging and what we're looking for is there a way to kind of look at credit that goes beyond just our traditional credit scores? As many individuals are kind of approaching the home buying segment within their life, they may not have traditional credit scores. So we're looking to see if, we can open that credit box to be looking more towards alternative credit. So, there's a lot of conversations that are happening at all different levels. I encourage you, if anybody has any ideas, anything at all that you think is worth taking a deeper dive into, I think that's how we end up getting solutions to a lot of the issues that Rhode Islanders are faced with, is by doing it together. So I know we're trying to do our part, and as we look to the affordability and trying to close that wealth gap, really is one of the challenges that Rhode Island has for the upcoming year. We're going to try to meet people where they are. We're going to give them the education that we need. We're going to look at that down payment assistance. And, we need to have that adaptive leadership that's going to drive transformation. So I encourage all of you, great job on participating in these type of forums. Any questions at all, please either reach out to me through the chat. You can, contact me individually, but I'd love to hear from everybody and try to address as many challenges that we can. Solutions are really what we need at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Brenda.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. So next, I am going to turn it over to David Salvatore. He's going to talk about. David, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bev, and thank you, Ann, and the rest of the team for joining this panel discussion this morning. This is a topic that we continue to talk about in our Government Affairs Committee and throughout the association from a legislative perspective. And, Brenda and Mark and Phil and some others, we talked a lot about education, but which I'm going to touch on legislatively in a moment. But, from the Government Affairs Committee's perspective, we're interested in legislation that's going to close that gap in home ownership. And it's surprising to us that, the home ownership gap between people of color and white persons in America is still the highest it's been in 50 years. And that's problematic for a couple of reasons. One, I think it speaks to the inherent bias that still remains in the real estate industry. And then secondly, from a business model perspective, it's just not smart business. And, if our members and sales agents are looking to increase business, then we shouldn't be shutting people out of the home buying experience. And the video that you all saw at the beginning, I think speaks volumes about the inherent bias that remains in our industry today. When we look at home ownership rates, white Americans have certainly had a leg up over the decades in terms of how easy the process is to purchasing that first home. And during the last several years, the home ownership rate for white Americans remains at it hovers right around 70%, while the home ownership rate for Black Americans continues to be 30 percentage points less. And we see the same thing for Latino Americans and Asian Americans as well. The numbers are a little higher for home ownership rate than Black Americans, but still that there are too many people being shut out of the home buying experience, again, because of the inherent bias that they experience. And if you look at the first-time home buyer rate, it continues to be lower than past decades. I think it's right now around 33 or 35%, whereas in the 80s, it might have been over 40%. So there's a lot of work to do in terms of closing the gap in home ownership, and one, making your business model much more effective in providing opportunities, new housing opportunities to folks, not only on the homeownership side, but on the rental side as well. If folks who are renting feel that they don't have access to safe and sustainable housing, then it's going to take them longer, much longer, to purchase that first home. And again, from a business perspective, I think we have to do much better in that space. There are 3 bills that we are tracking and supporting at the State House this legislative session around fair housing. The first one speaks to a lot of the conversation that's taken place this morning, and that's around education. As you all know, you're required to take 3 hours a fair housing course during the pre-licensing process. that is part of the regulatory rules that have been promulgated by the Department of Business Regulations, but we want to codify that and strengthen that language in Rhode Island general law. Then we want to take it a step further. So as you all know, you're required to take 24 hours of continuing education during a renewal cycle or 2 years. We are asking the General Assembly this session to mandate 3 hours of fair housing. So 3 hours of the 24 continuing education hours be dedicated for fair housing. Now, some of you might be asking, there are only so many classes around fair housing that you can take. And we recognize that, we want to stave off some boredom relative to the education requirements as part of your continuing growth in the industry. So Anne and her team have compiled a list or an inventory of fair housing courses at RIAR's education school and throughout the state. And believe it or not, there's quite a menu of options that are available to real estate licensees in Rhode Island. But we're also prepared to work with the National Association of Realtors and leveraging some of our resources, both at the state and national level, so that there are additional courses available. And when we think about fair housing, that's a very broad term, right? So we want to make sure that folks are being educated so we can root out, again, some of the inherent bias that is in the real estate industry while making all of you better sales agents and brokers. Again, we recognize that education is going to be paramount to addressing this issue of implicit bias in real estate. And we're trying to get ahead of it in being proactive. So the General Assembly is strongly considering our legislation around increasing the education requirements around fair housing. So we'll keep you posted on that front. Mark touched on rentals. There are 2 rental bills that we are strongly supporting this session. And the first one we have supported now for the last 4 years, and that's the so-called source of income housing discrimination bill. That bill would prohibit a landlord or a housing provider from discriminating against a prospective tenant who is using a housing choice voucher to pay their rent. Now, some might ask, what does this mean for a housing provider? What does this mean for a landlord? A landlord would still be able to do his or her due diligence when screening an applicant. What they are no longer able to do is post on Facebook, on their website, or even through a telephone call that no Section 8 is allowed. And this was important for us from a legislative perspective, because again, touching on the point that I made earlier, if folks feel that they don't have access to safe and affordable housing now at the rental level, then they're going to continue being shut out of the home buying process in the future. So this is a bill that we strongly support. There, again, are still due diligence requirements that a housing provider or a landlord can still take on when they're screening applicants, but just keep in mind that no longer can a homeowner post or say there is no Section 8 allowed in that particular dwelling. So that bill has passed. It's making its way, I believe, to the governor's desk this morning at 11 o'clock. He'll be signing the bill. And I think we're certainly on the right side of history with that one. And the last bill is Senate Bill 563, which the Government Affairs Committee, it's not our bill, but they strongly support. And this bill amends the definition of sexual orientation, and it allows for the Superior Court to hear these cases after the Human Rights Commission at the state level has forwarded a case to the judiciary. So right now, there are cases where a landlord can discriminate in Rhode Island based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. And it was surprising to us to learn that there are still exemptions for this type of rental discrimination based on the characteristics that I just provided to you. So that exemption is going to be, or has been proposed to be removed from the general laws. And again, the Superior Court would have much more authority over hearing these cases without having to go through the the Human Rights Commission at the state level. So the Human Rights Commission would, at the request of a petitioner, vote a complaint to the judiciary to hear, and then the the Human Rights Commission would send a notice to sue to a potential defendant. So these are some of the bills that we're looking at currently. We'll continue looking at home ownership opportunities. It was great to hear Brenda say or share with us a lot of the programs that are happening at Rhode Island Housing. We're looking at a bill that would provide for an opportunity to create what's called a first-time homebuyer savings account, very similar to an education savings plan or a retirement plan. There would be tax incentives, state income tax incentives for a prospective home buyer. So a lot of these different programs can work in parallel with each other. And again, looking to close that gap in home ownership and provide every Rhode Islander with an opportunity to buy that first home. So we'll continue looking at legislation that enhances the home buying experience. If any of you have any ideas legislatively on how we can address these, we're open to suggestions and ideas. But I'm very proud of the Government Affairs Committee and the direction that they've taken and how serious they're taking this topic. So we look forward to continuing that robust discussion around diversity and inclusion from a legislative perspective. Thank you.
David, if I can just add to your commentary regarding education. So if this bill passed where it's mandatory that we take 3 hours of fair housing, what I'll probably end up doing is kind of doing micro courses. And it will be segmented. It could be, something like fair housing with the protected classes and all the inferences thereof. And then we'll do something maybe on diversity and inclusion, and maybe another hour. So, because I was licensed for so many years, I kind of know what's going through your head right now. Oh my God, not another 3 hours of the same fair housing. We will mix it up. We will make it worth your time. We will do things like, here come the judge kind of thing. And we'll have case scenarios where we'll have both sides of a conversation represented. So that way it will be worth, 1 hour or 2 or 3 hours of your time. So what I'm looking to our learners, our members, what I'm looking for is to glean from your experiences. I have my own couple of scenarios which were tragic, cost me a lot of lost commission dollars, but it was the right thing to do with the seller who was so biased. I can't even think of the words to describe this seller, but I ended up losing 7 listings because she wouldn't let those blank people live in her neighborhood. So it's there. We can't ignore it, and we can all grow in this area. So thank you, David, for your diligence and bringing this to the forefront.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ann.
Okay, Bev.
Thank you. So we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. I think one is for Brenda, or actually I think any of you, if anyone knows the answer. Regarding affordable housing. Oh, it looks like somebody may have just answered that question. Mark answered it. Thank you so much. Mark just answered the fair housing question. Where if there were certain states doing better than others, and if there's a model that can be replicated. So I'll just read your answer, Mark. At the national level, unless you want to, would you like to take that?
I forget what I wrote. No, you can read it. I think. So at the national level, within the Housing Opportunities Committee, We're working on, so the question was, are there states that are doing it better than us? Of course, everyone's doing everything better than us in Rhode Island except for the ocean, But what we're doing is trying to get the states on board to enact legislation that would limit the restrictions on zoning. Zoning and NIMBY, not in my backyard, are the biggest hurdles to affordable housing, because affordable housing is a stigma. That's, everyone hears that word and cringes a bit, and it's not that case at all. It's people, it's two working adults trying to afford a house, and in this market, it's even harder than ever. So we're trying to put together state legislation guidelines or direction that they would become state zoning laws, and then municipalities would have to follow that. It's an ongoing battle, and David could tell you anything in government takes 4 times as long. So we're doing our best.
Thank you.
So if I can just interject for a second. So a few years ago, when we were going through the decline, the federal government made NSP money available. Don't ask me what the acronym stands for. I can't remember because I'm old. But I do remember that there was a bunch of money where they took, kind of fallen neighborhoods and reinvigorated them. Do you think at some point, and David, this is a question for you too, at some point, do you think the federal government will recognize the critical environment that we're in as far as the lack of affordable housing in today's marketplace? Do you think funding will be made available and we'll go back to, that kind of assistance?
I do, Ann, and we've heard the current president talk about making housing part of his legislative priority. But what I know about the federal government is whenever they're looking to implement and carry out a plan, they're going to ask states to have some skin in the game. And I think the states are going to have to step up in terms of loosening some of the regulatory barriers at the municipal level, especially around zoning. I think states are going to have to create, and this is just my opinion, but for those states that don't have a dedicated revenue stream to fund housing, they could be required to take advantage of some of the federal programs that are coming down the pike.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I thought we changed the language. Instead of affordable housing, didn't we change it to workforce?
There are several terms out there relative to housing opportunities. Affordable housing under the state definition means that anybody who spends more than 30% of their adjusted gross income or the median income in a specific area would be deemed affordable. And then workforce housing is something that we're certainly interested in as well. That's more around middle class housing, right? So that couple or that individual that's making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, where is the middle housing for these folks? And right now, there's just not enough supply. And I think you're going to hear the federal government talking more about providing more opportunities for these folks as well.
And Brenda, if I can call on you for a second, I know Rhode Island Housing has a program, FSS, and that's about the voucher assistance, but it's a rigorous program, correct?
So it's a product that Rhode Island Housing looks at. Some of the credit unions have also made that available to lending, but what it is an individual that has a housing choice voucher can take that voucher and apply that towards their income in order to qualify for a mortgage. So we have been successful with seeing people graduate from the rental to go into home ownership. It is a little bit of a challenge because your voucher is dependent upon where the individual is living. So your voucher is going to change depending upon where the property is. But it is a product that I know we look at quite a bit, and we're always there to promote it. There's a product that Rhode Island Housing offers through their leased housing area which is a family self-sufficiency program, which has individuals that would join into this that are currently on the Section 8. And they may have a goal of within a year to graduate to homeownership. And during that time, they'll actually put funds aside to help with closing costs, maybe additional down payment. And then it's also a financial literacy that can also help improve credit scores if need be, and really kind of look at the whole income, assets, and credit and address any of the issues that come up. So it is something that's currently available, and I think you are going to see more people using that voucher towards homeownership.
So there's a class in the making.
There is, absolutely.
Thank you, Bev. Go ahead.
Thank you. Great, thanks so much for that. Anyway, do any of our other panelists have anything to contribute? Please feel free. I am going to turn things over to Susan. Susan's going to talk about the appraisal process and how that all relates. Thank you very much for being here today, Susan.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for inviting me. The appraisal process, I know we are the bane of every realtor's existence, but we take a look at a house. We're supposed to be fair. We're supposed to be objective. We are not supposed to have any interest in either the buyer, the seller, the house, the neighborhood. We literally go into a property and it's like the facts only. That being said, there are cases of discrimination out there across the country that we've heard of. I mean, most of the time when I'm going into a house that's being sold, I meet the realtor or I have a lockbox. I don't really know who is the owner of the house. I don't know who the seller of the house is. And most of the complaints that are coming in for appraisals is on refinancing. So we are addressing this on a national level. But one of the first things I want to say that on every Fannie Mae form, every FHA appraisal form, on the first page, it says race and racial composition of the neighborhood are not appraisal factors. Additionally, we sign the document, and there's a bunch of certifications that we as appraisers sign. And certification 17 says that I have no present or interest in the property that's the subject of the report. I will have no present or prospective personal interest or bias with respect to the participants in the transaction. I did not base either partially, completely, my analysis or opinion of market value in this appraisal report on race, color, religion, sex, age, marital status, handicap, familial status, or national origin. And also as part of the certification, I state that any intentional or negligent misrepresentation is subject to law. So we have a lot of ways, and one of the things that I really want to stress is that if you feel that an appraisal is done and there was bias involved or discrimination involved, there are ways to complain about it. And I'm going to actually type in some phone numbers, and I think Beverly is going to send this out too as well. The state DBR, Bill DeLuca is in charge, and he is the one that first contact. Let me just put his number down. And what he would do is walk you through or walk your client through the process of how to file a complaint. I'm on the state appraisal board, and we take complaints very, very seriously. And what happens is when a complaint is filed, we take a look at the appraisal and we see, is there in fact a reason to complain? Is it incompetence? Or is it just the market? I mean, a lot of times we get complaints and, the appraiser didn't come to value. It is an opinion of value. It's really difficult right now to do appraisals because of the lack of comparables. But that being said, if you do feel that there's any sort of discrimination going on, please, please, please file a complaint. It's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this. And there have been across the country, like I said, several complaints filed. And you see an appraiser doing the first appraisal that comes in, $150,000 less than the second one. There is a Black family involved, and when the second appraiser comes in, they put in a white family, and all of a sudden the appraisal is $150,000 higher. There have been several incidences of this, and there have been complaints filed, and there has been, people have lost their license over it. So please, please, please complain. The other toll-free number, this is the, we are also governed by the appraisal subcommittee, and they will direct you also if you're dealing with another state. This is the number, this is the hotline for filing complaints. What we're doing as an industry, the Appraisal Foundation has started a task force as well for discrimination. And what they're trying to do is really try to get more diverse people into the profession. And I think as agents and brokers, we need to do the same. We need to see if we can get more diversity into our industry. Right now, the appraisal industry, the average age is 60 years old, and it's usually a white male. So, we really need to see and seek out. And I implore you, if you know anyone who's interested in becoming a realtor, an appraiser, an agent, reach out to that person and say, hey, try it out. Let's see if we can do it. The Appraisal Foundation has started a mentoring program for both veterans actually, and for people of diversity, to see if they just want to explore the profession. So as a mentor, I can have somebody call me and they say, what's it like? How much money can I expect to make? Is there any business out there? So that mentorship program is underway right now. In terms of education, we have to, every 2 years, we have a course that we have to take, and it's called USPAP Update. And when you're first starting off as an appraiser, it's a 14-hour course, but every 2 years, it's a 7-hour update. As of 2022, they're going to be creating one of those hours is going to be for fair housing. So, again, that's one of the things that's going forward, which is great. The other thing is, I know that NAR is considering doing Fair Haven for appraisers. And the Fair Haven program did take, I think it was 12 to 16 months to create. It's an awesome course. If you haven't taken, I really implore you to take it. But being done on an appraisal level will be also beneficial. I'm looking forward to that. So I think that's, I've got some handouts that Bev will send out in terms of just some resources for you. But if you have any questions about appraising, or what to do if you really do think that your client is a victim, please reach out, and please, we can't get rid of the bad apples in the industry unless you file a complaint. So that's my creed right now. So if you have any questions, please ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We appreciate your time today. I'm going to turn things over to Jeff Nelson. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity. Right now, we're in a very unique market right now for residential properties. On average, homes are having tremendous offers put on there, and then families are just being bought out by overpriced. Can you go to the next slides? So the current real estate market right now, on the left-hand side, it will show that equity has increased throughout the whole country. On average, we're looking at an increase of 24,000 in Rhode Island in particular. We're looking at an increase of 39,000 of equity throughout the cross of the country. And then FICO scores of distribution of the loans on the right-hand side, FICO scores have gone tremendously higher. Due to the pandemic, it caused a lot of lenders to tighten and scrutinize their lending policies and guideline requirements. So this has put a tremendous hurdle in for first-time home buyers, because a lot of these families, they don't have the most excellent credit scores, or they don't have larger down payments, such as to qualify for a lot of these properties. So they're losing a lot of the bids. If you go to the next slide for me, please, Bev. Next one, I'm sorry. So the FHA was created to help affordable housing and help workforce and families get it started. The great thing about the FHA allows you to put 3.5% down on a 1 to 4 unit property, and it requires a lower FICO score. But with the FHA, loan limits varies based off the counties, and they have stricter guidelines in regards to appraisals. Right now, appraisals is what's making or breaking deals for a lot of these properties that are being sold in the market. Due to the aggressiveness of the market, sellers don't have to put in so much work and renovations or cleaning up the property as much as they had to sell the property. A lot of offers are being made with contingency plans put waived just so get the deal across. I know a lot of my clients, they've put over 25,000 asking price on the home, and they've lost because of different contingencies that the conventional side holds better terms for. On the conventional side, we click to the next slide. Conventional side, if you're a first-time home buyer, it allows you 3%. If you're a single-family resident, 5%. As of April 1st, there's been a switch to 2 to 4 unit down payments. You need a minimum of 15%, and it requires a higher FICO score to get you qualified for a conventional. What does that really mean? In Rhode Island and in Massachusetts, mainly, there's a lot of multifamilies, and that's kind of like an opportunity for a lot of first-time home buyers or people who come from lower demographics to really increase their wealth and build generational wealth for their families. So when the FHA product is now allowing them to get approved, because sellers essentially they have the choice of who they approve, and then put the 15% down, it kind of puts them out of the market of what they can get qualified for. Majority of my FHA clients are being held in the market for at least additional 3 to 4 months before they get approved, versus the conventional can spend about 2 months in the market, 3 months in the market, and get the home if you have a higher down payment. Because of the flexible appraisal requirements, a lot of sellers are going towards conventional buyers. There's other programs that help first-time home buyers, such as different grants and down payment assistance. But with those things, it increases the wait time the loan can be funded, because you're going through a third party. So a lot of sellers and lenders tend to stray away from that, which is not helping the first-time home buyers, and it's kind of creating the chaos that we have right now. And that's pretty much kind of a quick summary of what's going on in the market from the conventional side and the FHA side. Some of the strategies that I've used to help some of my clients get approved is looking for distressed properties in the market, because a great program that FHA does have is called the FHA 203K loan, which allows you to roll in the renovation portion of the home into the total existing loan. So if you find a property that's not turnkey and it needs some work in, you can do it to purchase the property, and then we get a licensed contractor that could go in, and then whatever the repair cost is, you can roll that into there and still use it for the 3.5% down, and that's available for a 1 to 4 unit. So it's another area that's been another strategy that I've used for my clients to kind of get them into a home. It requires a little bit more sweat equity and a little bit longer time, but it's less competition for those properties, and it does allow you to get a property where you're not being pushed out from the market. Because a lot of properties, as I said, with the equity increasing, the values are, if the property is listed for $400,000, a lot of times it's being sold for $450,000, going above asking price on a consistent basis, and we don't see any end going on anytime soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate you taking the time. Please.
So I feel your pain regarding the appraisals, but as agents, if when you meet the appraiser out there, if you explain what the buyer has seen and what kind of offers you've had, it could help the process. What the appraiser and what the expert agent, they've seen most of the competition. They've seen most of the comparables that I'm going to be looking at and using. And it would be very helpful if you said, hey, listen, I was in that kitchen and the pictures on MLS look great, but this is the reality of it. I do think that The appraiser has to listen to the agents, and the agents have to communicate with the appraiser as to what the buyer is looking for, what the typical buyer is going to buy, and compare it against. The other thing is, if you've listed the property for 250 and you're selling it for 325, either there's something wrong with your listing or something wrong with the market. But try to explain that to the appraiser, because the appraiser has to explain that in the report. So, you know, the underwriter is looking at the appraisal saying, okay, the list price was 250, but they sold it for 325. What's going on? Are you just mimicking what's happened in the market, or are you actually doing the appraisal? So really take a look and really try to explain to the appraiser what's going on in the market. And hopefully, you know, that'll help the appraisal process a little bit smoother.
Well, the problem doesn't really come. That is a great strategy. Before we even get to the appraisal portion, is FHA just has stricter guidelines around chip paint, or if there's siding issues, or if you don't have railings on your staircases. These are things that you can't get past that. So now if a seller does not want to fix the chip paint or does not want to add railing to their staircases, that property will not be FHA approved. So if a lot of my first time home buyers, 3.5% down is a tremendous benefit for you. If you don't have that 15% down, if you don't have that 10% down, or if you're using a grant assistance for Rhode Island Housing or Mass Housing, that allows those people to become homeowners, and that's a wonderful feeling. So now to understand that, to because of the market and the low inventory and just the aggressiveness of that, you won't even be approved for a home, or you won't be considered. Is where we're fine. Before we even get to the appraisal portion, they're not even being considered because the seller doesn't even want to work on the property. It's like, why would I put in extra work when I can literally sell my house as is and get above asking prices? And that's where it's like, where do we find a way to bring balance or makes it advantageous for the seller to consider an FHA borrower again? To avoid going through extra hurdles, they're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. No, conventional person, all right, great. We'll go with you, less headaches, the appraisal, as long as it comes back as is. I don't have to fix anything. I get extra money. I'm catching out and I'm leaving. Versus a lot of these first-time home buyers, like it's not easy to save $10,000. It's not easy to build your credit up, especially if you don't have the financial literacy, if you don't come from that background. For my example, like my mother didn't have this knowledge. My family didn't have that knowledge. This is all self-taught within the last 4 years. And before that, I'm like, wow, I don't know anything. And so many of my first-time home buyers don't know anything about just looking at their credit, budgeting, financing. So when they finally gather all of that, it's demoralizing at times. You're putting in these offers in, and you told yourself, I'm gonna do everything correctly, I'm gonna have everything right, and just because the market is the way it is, or you choosing not to work with me because I have an FHA versus conventional, I feel like there's no way to really approve it. But that's a type of discriminatory standards right now. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, they're associating FHA borrowers as if, oh, they don't have the full funds, or they have to put a lower down payment. So definitely we don't want to. And in the cases, like, no, it's a tool. The FHA is a tool to give opportunities for workforce and lower income families. Does not mean they don't qualify. Doesn't mean the loan's not going to approve. So this is a different tool. The conventional side is another tool as well. You look at the person itself, look at the loan officer making those connections and giving an opportunity. How do we find a way to still make the FHA tool or loan look attractive to these sellers and give our first-time home buyers a real opportunity to get home ownership? A lot of these properties are being bought by outside investors or people who are coming in just to improve their portfolio, which is nothing wrong with that. But we have to make it fair for those who really want an opportunity to have their first American dream right there. At least it was for me and a lot of people that I work with.
Great. Thank you. Brenda, did you have anything to add there?
Sorry, that mute button gets me every time. No, I think that, a lot of the challenges that Jeff's seeing in the marketplace, we're hearing that from all of our lender partners. I do encourage anybody that has that property on the market, really have the conversation with your seller. If there are things that there may be need in order to be fixed, we're seeing loans that come in, and the majority of the loans that Rhode Island Housing does are FHA loans. So again, we're kind of working as an investor, so we may see a lot of those issues may end up being identified and addressed before we're getting them into a purchase for us to purchase the loan itself. Rhode Island Housing is actually reintroducing the limited 203K, which has been suspended since the pandemic happened. So, I applaud Jeff. I think that is such a great product in order to address those, properties that need a little TLC. And I think in Rhode Island, there's plenty of those that are out there. So, one of the things that I do think is a challenge is just buyers being priced out of the market. So we are having discussions within, the organization itself to see what value add can we have. Is it putting together a stronger pre-approval? Is it looking to do more of the processing up front on a loan? So, I do think that these are hurdles that are definitely, they're out there. Whether or not there's truth to a lot of them, I know we're closing loans and, down at our loan center in like 30, 35 days. So, you really shouldn't have the barrier of extra assistance or an FHA loan contributing to your whole overall process to get to the closing table. But I think it's great that the conversations are happening, and we'll find solutions to all of these things. It just might take a little bit.
Thank you. Monica, I want to share with you this morning.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see your shining faces, or at least your names and black screens. So I'm going to be talking about just a few things. One of the reasons to pay attention to fair housing laws, besides the fact that they're the right thing to do, there are some really hefty penalties in violating state laws. And I just want to quickly mention the maximum fine for violating fair housing laws in Rhode Island is $10,000 for a first offense. Plus, you'd be paying the attorney's fees and court costs for the person who filed the complaint. We are going to have some regulators from HUD who enforce the federal fair housing laws come to speak to us on Thursday, April 22nd. So the registration details are there. I think it'd be really interesting to hear from the position of regulators and people who actually receive these complaints, what they're looking for and what rules they follow and the latest updates. So I think many of you know, or most of you know, that last November, the National Association of Realtors updated the Realtor Code of Ethics to crack down on discrimination. I think the most important change, and I've attended, I think, all of the NAR forums about this change and the significance for realtors, is that there's no longer a separation between things that you say in your personal life or your work life. And that's particularly important when you have agents in your office or you on social media. So specifically, you can still make derogatory comments about politicians or people who are not protected classes if that's something you feel that you want to do. But when it comes to discrimination, hate speech, and harassment, whether you're posting something with friends, whether you're having a conversation with someone at a showing, all of those things are now violations of the Realtor Code of Ethics. So that's why it's really important to step up what you have. The Rhode Island Association of Realtors Risk Management Committee, and I know at least one of our members is here today in the audience. I won't out him unless he wants to out himself. But the Risk Management Committee is encouraging brokers also to take a look at your policies in light of this change to the NAR Code of Ethics. Okay, so already, as I said, probably most of you have something like this already, but if you don't, bare minimum, put something in a written office policy saying that your company will comply with state, federal, and all fair housing laws, and that you won't tolerate discrimination of any kind. So that's just the bare bones minimum that you want to have in an office policy. Another is you might want to get more specific if you haven't already addressed it, that any form of discriminatory advertising or social media is prohibited. And if the people in your office are not familiar with all the protected classes in Rhode Island, that's an important thing too. You can, and I can send out resources after this if we like, but you really want to make sure, because Rhode Island protects many more types of people than the federal laws do. Rhode Island, until very recently, the federal laws didn't protect people discrimination based on sexual orientation. That's something new as of this year that that the federal laws now protect. Rhode Island's protected individuals based on their orientation for many years now. So Rhode Island has a much, much more expansive list of protected classes in fair housing laws. Okay, so you don't want to make sure that people don't allow discriminatory advertising or social media on their social media, any kind of TV spots, radio, Facebook, any kind of brochures people are putting out. Just as a quick side note, over the years that I worked for the Realtor Association, the most frequently asked fair housing questions that I receive are about either discrimination against families with children or emotional support animals. What is an emotional support animal? Are condos, is a condo association or landlord required to accommodate? Those are some issues that the regulators will get into more detail about at the program on the 22nd. So I won't get into that today. Okay, so a few more points here and then I'll conclude with buyer love letters. And these are a few things that you want to talk about, whether you have a written procedure or at least discuss this at an office meeting. What happens if someone in your office suspects that a client is discriminating? Another question I've been getting lately is, what if a client, sometimes you get calls from, say, a cooperating broker who thinks that his or her client has been discriminated against or suspects that. So how do you want to handle that in that situation from your perspective as a principal broker or a team leader? You certainly want to encourage licensees to go to you and have you or another trusted person step in your office to find out what really happened, what kind of discussions were there. I think one thing that's difficult is, even if and I think a dilemma that many agents and brokers can face is the fact is most of you are not like, I receive a salary. Most of you are commission based. And so it's easy for me to say, hey, walk away from that listing, walk away, walk away from that property management contract, walk away from that client if you believe that discrimination is going on, because I'm getting paid the same no matter what. But here's the thing, even if you or your agent confronts a client and says like, hey, I'm not able to do, we're not able to do that. It happens often in rental situations, maybe more subtle in sales. But even if you're faced in that situation, as long as you still have that listing and are still working with that client, you then become part of the problem. One story that some of you may have heard me mention is one, or you may have heard about it yourselves, is one that took place in Westerly. And there's a case still pending in court in Massachusetts. But so here are the allegations, and it did get a lot of coverage last year. One of our local realtors had a listing contract to sell a second home. They presented the offer to the sellers. The sellers were out of state. The sellers agreed to all the terms. Everything was great. Listing broker sent over the purchase and sales, because this is all a phone discussion. The listing broker sent over the purchase and sales agreements to the sellers of the property. The sellers looked at the purchase and sales agreement at the names of the buyers, saw the first name of one of the buyers was Ebony, and asked the listing broker, I guess I should say allegedly, but since it's still in court, but asked the listing broker, are these buyers Black? Imagine being you or one of your agents in a situation like that. What would you do? How would you handle it? And the office in question, from everything I've read, handled it beautifully. And I'm sure that there was a lot of internal agonizing over it. But what they did was the broker of the office spoke with the sellers, said, nope, you can't, you can't do this. They tried to get the sellers to change their mind. The sellers then denied that they'd said anything discriminatory at all. They actually flatly refused to sell to the buyers once they saw that one of the buyers' first name was Ebony. So from there, the listing company not only dropped the listing, they actually filed an affidavit in support of the buyers when they filed their complaint. So like I said, the buyers live in Massachusetts, so they filed their complaint in Massachusetts and it's pending in district court. But these are situations that you or your agents, if you haven't faced them directly already, you could. So it would be a good thing just in an office meeting to have a run through. Have any of you ever seen this happen? What would you do? And this is a sales case, not just a rental case, which, I think more blatant discrimination is more common in rentals, but it can happen anywhere. Okay, so that's an important conversation to have with your folks. And I know we're pushing up on time here, so let me just make a couple of more points here. One is just inconsistency. So if you have any formal office procedures about, let's say, asking potential clients and customers to show an ID, or for a potential buyer to show a pre-approval or get pre-approved with Jeff or anyone else before you schedule showings, make sure you do that for everybody. Don't just kind of pick and choose. Consistency is excellent protection against fair housing violations. The other point is don't assume what customers and clients can afford. Don't assume what kind of financing they need. I've heard now from a handful of realtors who have been dealing with buyers of color, who they found that whether it was a lender or another realtor just assumed that they wanted FHA financing. And maybe they did, maybe they wanted it, but the fact is, don't make that assumption. You have no idea what kind of financing people can afford. And also don't assume where they want to live based on what they look like, based on their race, color, national origin, any other protected class. So asking and listening are really, and consistency are key ways. So the final thing, I know I'm dropping a lot of information on you, but we do have other forums coming up. The final comment I would like to make is about buyer love letters. So I don't know if folks are seeing those in the field. I've been getting a lot of calls about them lately in different parts of the state. So if anyone's not familiar with the buyer love letter, I don't have to tell you what the market's been like lately and how crazy the inventory shortages are, and buyers just pretty much willing to do anything to try and get a leg up on the competition. But the kind of letters we're seeing, I think can result, I know Phil and some others spoke about implicit bias before. So here's the thing, if I'm a buyer and I decide, you know what, I'm gonna write a letter to the seller. I know I'm competing with other buyers and I wanna get the seller to, maybe the seller will pick me if I send pictures of my family. So some of the examples I've seen are things like, dear sellers, my 2-year-old daughter, Lily, and 3-year-old son, Zachary, and husband and I dream of having a house with a backyard like yours. We would love it if our kids can walk to school when they're old enough. And then they include this cute picture of the kids like dressed up in costumes or outfits and things like that. Well, think about what's wrong with that. If you're representing the buyer, people might think, great, if it helps some buyer get a house, why not? But here's the thing, especially if you're including photographs, you're doing, one, the seller knows what color the buyers are. They know if they have kids or don't have kids. If they're talking about, I've seen some where people are talking about, oh, I grew up going to St. Patrick's Parish or, such and such a synagogue. Well, then you know what someone's religion is, or, a pretty good idea, or where they're from, So these are all things, and even if the seller isn't intentionally thinking, oh, I'll pick them because they look like they're the same skin color I am, the fact is all it takes one buyer has been turned down to realize, oh, I lost out because the seller didn't pick based on money, the seller terms or price and terms, they picked because they wanted someone like me. So have a discussion in your office about buyer love letters. There's an article about that in the most recent Realtor Digest. But think about it. If you're working with the buyer directly, don't help the buyer write one. If they're going to have anything having to do with protected people, classes that are protected under fair housing laws. If the buyers insist on presenting their own, well, they do that, but you really want to get yourself and your agents out of that loop, particularly if you've got photographs involved. If you're a listing broker, talk to the sellers. I've heard in some other states, although not so much here, some sellers are the ones saying, oh, we'll have the buyers send me letters so I can get a better idea of who they are. Well, no, No, you do not want to have a seller do that. So tell the sellers too, look, I don't want either of us to be exposed to any kind of a discrimination complaint. So why don't we agree that I'm not going to present these letters to you if we get any, or if you present them at all, they come in after. But anyway, so those are some discussions to have. Take a look at the article in your most recent Realtors Digest. And I am done talking.
Thanks to Monica for allowing us to use that. And
We have a program. It's with Keystone. It's an online course. It's 4 core credits called Fair Housing and Beyond. That normally is $45. Now through April 29th, we were able to make special arrangements with this online school, and we're offering that for $29. So take a look at some of the education that's available to you. Because without the education, you're really kind of driving blind, and that's not good for you, but particularly for the customers and clients that you serve. We are also looking to do these micro courses as we progress with different elements, whether it's affordability, diversity and inclusion, equity, fair housing, whatever it may be. We exist to be of service to you. But we can't do our job without input from you. So I really encourage you to keep in touch with us. You can direct email me. My email is ann@rirealtors.org. I need you to help me figure out what coursework that we need to provide. And I want it to be market driven and relevant to you. I can't do that without you. So ann@rirealtors.org. Tell me what's going on in the field. If you have subject matter experts that you have found in your profession have proven trustworthy and provide information to you that's relevant to your business, chances are it's going to be relevant to everyone else. So I encourage you, to keep us informed so that I never lose touch with what's happening in the field. So I think without further ado, Beverly, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're at the end of our program. I really would encourage you to mark your calendars because we are going to do broker forums. The next one will be July the 8th, if I'm not mistaken. We may condense it to do a combined program because I'm well aware that, July school vacations and things like that could be difficult. So that's in the making. We'll get word to you. But typically we do the broker forum first, and it's the second Thursday every quarter. So January, April, July, and October. Please encourage your broker to attend and participate in these broker forums because they're the leaders, they're the supervisors in your office. And if they don't know, then probably chances are you won't know things that you need to be, current with. And risk reduction. We live in a very litigious society, as you all know, and you need to be aware. That's your guarantee, really, of success. And it could be anything to do with our industry. Then the following Thursday, that's when we do your version because you look at life through a different lens than your supervising broker does. But if we can capture both of your attentions, then I'm sure with your help that we will be a resource for you to go to, which we are. I mean, what a valuable resource you have available with Monica and a legal hotline and forums and David. I mean, we have a lot to offer. So hopefully we'll see you at future events. And is this a wrap up now, Beverly? Have I not missed anything else?
remember to add rirealtors.org to your safe senders list. That way you'll make sure you'll get all of our emails because these programs are posted on social, but they're also sent to your email. So we want to make sure that you're seeing all of these great notices. We know sometimes there are a lot of emails, but these programs are very valuable and we want to make sure that you know about them. I would like to thank our panelists very much. Phil, David, Susan, Brenda, Mark, Jeff, Ann, thank you very much for joining us today and for last week as well. We appreciate the time you spent. And Susan, you too. I know you weren't on camera last week, but I know you were present and you participated and you were planning for this. So we appreciate that. and to our PD staff who's in the background helping us out always. So thank you very much for joining us today. Look out for the handout and for the recording within the next couple of weeks, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Much appreciated.